Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. You've just tuned into Women's AM. This morning I am joined by Sister Muna, Sister Nusrat and our special guest, Sister Nasima. Well, sisters, welcome back. And Sister Nasima, mashallah, we've introduced you as a mother and a family therapist. So tell us a little bit about what that means. What is a family therapist?
Well, a family therapist is a psychotherapy form of psychotherapy that works on the idea of relationships. So the work I do is working on an individual with issues around depression, anxiety, OCD, PTSD, trauma of any kind, but also with couples, so around couple therapy. So that would be around conflicts or relationship difficulties, be separation, divorce, or including maybe other sort of form of intimacy, difficulties in couple relationship, for example, as well as family work. So within the whole sort of family, meaning parents and children, where there's teenage or parenting difficulties and issues.
MashaAllah, that's a whole range of stuff.
Yes.
And do you find that helps you as well within your own sort of family setting as well, having this knowledge?
Well, sometimes it does, and other times, you can't do therapy on your own family because, only you know yourself, and also you're into that dynamic, so you can't step out of it.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you work with your clients, there is not that emotional attachment or issue. So it's not that it doesn't help, but it's not something you can't treat yourself.
Yeah, so you have to have some sort of detachment from it. Yes,
or you need someone else to be able to go to.
What a shame.
But it allows you to be informed.
Alhamdulillah. No, you need sort of that. You don't want to be too into it because you can't focus when it's in your own family. Yeah. Well, inshallah, we'll be going more into sort of tips and things that we can go into, inshallah, for this topic. Well, without further ado, let's get right to today's topic of postnatal depression. We often might ask the question whether anything can ever prepare us for motherhood. Right from the time you take your newborn home from the hospital, it dawns pretty quickly that there will be good and difficult times ahead. Learning to cope and learning more about your baby's needs and wants are some of the things that all new mothers experience. But for many women, the first few weeks can often take an unexpected turn towards postnatal depression. We'll be looking at how it affects the mother, her child, as well as the family. And remember, as always, this is a live discussion, so if you want to comment or put a question to the panelists, please call in. The number is on your screens now. Well, Sister Nasima, I'll come to you first. Is there anything that can really ever prepare you for the possibility of postnatal depression?
Well, it's a yes and a no. When I say yes, it means that, the more you read around, more you have opportunities to engage with your GP and your health visitor and so on in a perinatal process, then it allows you to be a little bit informed, but at the same time you can access your own wider kinship system. On the other hand, actually no, because I've had clients where I'm in private practice where clients have said, first child I was fine, second child I'm suffering with depression. So it's never that something, even if you've had or not had, and it's not something homogenous that everyone experiences at the same time. Sometimes some women don't experience it at all. So it's your own biological body and the hormonal change that you experience or go through that determines also what you experience, and obviously the support around the aftermath for the care. So it's not a straightforward answer. It's not something that we can say yes or no, but it's just that sometimes some women are predisposed to it more, depending on the biological hormonal sort of changes they experience. It's a hugely life-changing event for a woman when she goes through, on one level, her going through the pregnancy of the 9 month, preparing for the birth, then her menstrual cycle also will be disrupted, then also the actual birth process as well. And then within the first 4 days, the baby blue phase, which is quite normal, everyone sort of more or less goes through it, but it's what happens afterwards that we need to look out for the signs and symptoms, and there's different treatment process as well.
SubhanAllah, so it's something that you can...
I had my 3 children, no one warned me about postnatal depression.
Right.
If I didn't read about it either, so I didn't look at it. Probably I should have looked into it, but why I'm trying to say that no one warns you.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah, I didn't suffer from postnatal depression, but it could have easily happened.
Yeah.
It happens in 10% of the population, so it can happen to anyone.
Yes.
But if you have a supportive family and you have a supportive husband, people to help you with, then I think you can get through that emotional, physical, hormonal. Physical, you put all that weight on and your body changes.
There's a lot of things that go into why somebody would go into postnatal depression, but how easy is it to distinguish those symptoms, Sister Nusrat? I mean, is it something that, that comes with just being anxious about, going into motherhood and everything that entails?
I think it's very easy for people to sometimes conflate conflate postnatal depression with just what I'd call regular depression, but the two are actually slightly different because regular depression is unrelated to childbirth, whereas postnatal depression occurs after the birth of a baby.
Yes.
So and especially it becomes more pronounced if you've never had those feelings before, even prior to your birth. So postnatal depression is usually diagnosed within a year after giving birth, but can extend beyond that. And you may find that after you've had your baby, and if you're experiencing that, one of the symptoms would be that there's you feel sleep deprived, anxious, and even things that you once loved to take part in, like for example interests that you would have loved to do, you no longer have any interest, and it does have a detrimental impact in the sense that you find the transition to motherhood a bit more difficult for you to actually mentally as well as physically get into. Hormonally you feel unsteady. In terms of your sexual drive, it's much lowered, so your sex life essentially dwindles, and even your
affects your marriage,
affects your marriage, even with your friendships, because your friends desperately want to help you, but because they maybe don't understand that, it's
Subhanallah, and some of the symptoms that you mentioned are things that you would normally experience after having a child. That sleep deprivation, you know, being up with your child, the feeds, the changes, all of these things. So then it becomes a little bit more difficult in distinguishing between those things.
There is a different
guilty because they don't feel they love that child, or they don't feel loved, so they feel guilty. That's why a lot of women don't tell anyone.
There's another thing I just want to cut in there and just highlight. There's primary depression, which is the biological, which happens to most women and the process, but there's also secondary, which means the effect of what she's experiencing going through. So the effect you mentioned about couple and intimacy, but there's also relationship with other people, but more importantly, the attachment and bonding with the child. Women feel quite guilty if at the first phase they're not feeling natural, they're not attached, or they're not curious about their child. Maybe they feel like neglecting, so then they feel quite guilty about that, they haven't naturally bonded.
And that causes a negative effect as well.
And then makes them feel also internalise that and makes them not share that feeling, or they feel quite suicidal at that point as well if it's the first 6 months. I would say they need to sometime get it checked out with their physician, because if they're acting quite abnormally, this is now on the high end and the risk end of cases I'm talking about, where we've had minor cases where a parent self-harmed or harmed their child, for example, where they're psychotic type of behaviour, quite abnormal, which is where the partners and the parents or the family around need to be aware of that and take the mother to seek help, so that we can make sure that we're not concerned about on that level of health, that then it is more psychological, and also there's treatment for that. So there's, psychiatrists can prescribe them. Obviously that we have to be a little bit mindful, warning with that we don't take on for too many long period of treatment, so that they're not dependent on that, and then they also experience psychological referral.
I think it's about talking through some of these emotions and thoughts, because a lot of the times it's quite isolating. You feel really ashamed to talk about certain feelings that you're having, especially when you're a mother, because it's automatic. Everyone thinks that you're exactly you should be happy. Exactly.
You should be doing this.
One of the things that you mentioned,
judgment.
Exactly. One of the things you mentioned though is professional help, because I remember after giving birth, and probably a lot of women, their experience after giving birth is having health professionals come and visit them at home. Exactly. And I remember getting a questionnaire, and I thought, why are they asking me these questions? I feel fine. But subhanallah, it's really important to ask these questions, because a mother might not feel confident to tell her family members that actually she's not feeling fine, and it might just be that these are really a good way to open up.
But also sometimes it can be also lack of awareness, the fact actually that there will be help. The professionals also sometimes they don't share it with the professionals as well, because fear of like something might happen to them or their child. But actually if you raise awareness, this is more healthy, because it helps the mother and the child, so that they can eliminate any other difficulties, and then their focus could be more on the psychological and therapeutic help that could be offered.
But I've got a statistic here that says 1 in 7 women are likely to be affected by postnatal depression. So does that then mean it's normal for every woman to go through this process, or is this just basically just an outcome of the natural sort of hormonal processes?
I don't know about the research, but it's one possibility. We can speculate that it's been hidden before, and now it's becoming more aware, because the research is identifying women are speaking up more about those experiences. So perhaps these were already there, but we just didn't know about it.
Well, any woman can be prone to suffering from depression or postnatal depression. But there was an article in I think The Independent who said that women in dysfunctional or abusive relationships would suffer more.
Those are the secondary thing that comes up with a trigger point. You know, if there's already relationship difficulties or extended family difficulty, it might show up more in that point because
there's always a trigger to
there may be other things, secondary issues that's going on that needs to be looked at.
Exactly,
and this is where you can have psychological therapeutic support. But also coming into that, I think to be mindful of the fact that what is your coping strategy as a woman and as a partner? And also what's your world and Islamic vision about that? So if you have those ideas in mind, then what treatment might you go for? So using our own treatment as well, people, you know, with dua, ruqya, and therefore also going to the physician as well. You can have both. It's not exclusive.
It's not either or.
No. And the reason that you can't pray for the first 40 days, for example, it's quite difficult on the soul. You know, you need that salah, you need... so therefore you've got your hormones, your body, your baby who keeps you up at night, your emotional roller coaster, and on top of that you can't pray to relieve that stress. So it's quite difficult.
Yeah, alhamdulillah, we do have a caller on the line. We have brother Azhar on the line. Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Brother, do you have a question or a comment?
Yes. There are two things which I'm going to say is this, that firstly, in a state of general day-to-day life where your emotional and other aspects of like regular depressions come into play, how you cope with that. Purely in Islamic context, I'm talking about it, okay? How in your day-to-day life. Now, if that is helpful to you to overcome certain problems in your day-to-day life, then I'm trying to project that into this state of your postnatal depression, how a woman can cope in that context. And the second is that in the supporting mechanism which you have mentioned, it would be very helpful if beforehand, especially husband and any other member of the family, is fully made aware of the symptoms of the postnatal depression which might appear in a particular person, so that person is already geared. There are many husbands who just don't have any clue what happens, and then the whole thing is turned upside down, and then you just run around and to get help. So I think this is the point I was trying to help you. Thank you.
Jazakallah khair, brother. That's a really valid point. You know, the aspect, the perspective that we have, but also the, whether family members and husbands are actually aware of this. So, sister, would you like to address that?
So really, thank you. I thank the caller for that point, because it was the back of my mind. What it is that it's not just the women, and you asked that, are you ever prepared for that? Is the father ever prepared for that? If there are other household members around aware of some of that conversation? So part of the process of birthing or preparation, one of the conversations could be had, what might likely to happen at birth and post-birth. So that awareness just helps everybody, particularly also because the partner is more intimate and is aware of the wife's movement, her behaviour, whether it seems to be fitting what we call normally, or as she would normally cope. You know, the brother here highlighted, how do you normally cope with every other aspect of challenge in your life, and how do you cope? I mentioned that coping strategy. So it's really important for a woman and a man and a couple to think about what is their coping strategy. Do they rely on Allah? Do they rely on, you know, charity? Do they believe this is a process of test, so they have to be patient? So it's mind thinking as well.
There's a lot of things that goes into it.
If the child is unwell, or if there are complications after birth that can exasperate postnatal depression.
Exactly. So inshallah we'll come back. Inshallah we'll come back to the rest of this discussion, inshallah. Unfortunately, we have to go to a break, but stay tuned for the rest of the discussion on postnatal depression. But before we go, take a look at this week's competition.